Hi everyone, I'm Cassandra. I run a page called Light and Death, and we are here today with the co-founder of Death Cafe, which is amazing when you think about it, because it's something that we've all learned to grow. Like, we've grown with it, and we love it, and it's international now, and it's amazing to think that it was started by John in his house in Hackney. So what a privilege and honor it is to sit with you today, Susan, and to have this conversation. So thank you so much, and let's get into it.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us, actually, and thanks for coming, Susan. I wanted to kickstart with showing a film that we made together in September, because it's been 10 years now, hasn't it, since Death Cafe started in September. I'm going to show a little film that we made for the anniversary, which you featured in, and it gives a bit of a history as well, doesn't it, Susan, about how the Death Cafe started and where it is today. So shall I share that now and show it?
Please.
This is John Underwood in London, Hackney. I just wanted to say some words because Sunday, 25th of September 2016 marks the 5th anniversary from the first Death Cafe, which happened downstairs in the house where I stand, facilitated by my mum, Susan Barsky Reid.
We had a very strict structure for the first Death Cafe, which we soon abandoned because we agreed together that it actually worked better with less structure and with more opportunity for people to just say what they wanted to say.
It's become hugely popular. I mean, are you surprised by the fact that the idea has taken off around the world?
Yes, I mean, it is surprising, but it's really wonderful, and I think it signifies that things are changing very, very quickly.
It made him think about getting everything in line to make sure that Death Cafe could continue appropriately in different circumstances, and one of those was following his death. He wrote me an email and said, "Jules, if I were to die before a proper structure is in place, will you please take over the running of Death Cafe?" And I said, yes, of course, and I never imagined that it was something that I would actually have to do. And then in 2017, very suddenly, John died from a rare form of leukemia. We weren't aware that he was sick, and it changed all of our lives immensely.
Why do you think it's important to continue doing Death Cafe?
It helps me to feel close to him. And on a national and international level, I think it's very important for people to talk about death and dying.
It was very interesting when all of our hosts very suddenly had to start taking online conversations. But the beautiful thing about this was that people from different sides of the world have been able to come together and share their experiences.
One way to help Death Cafe to continue to grow and develop would be to consider becoming a donor through Patreon and giving some money to Death Cafe to help us maintain it.
I want to thank you on Death Cafe's 10th birthday for whatever participation you've given to Death Cafe.
Thank you for growing John's vision, and it's thanks to all our wonderful Death Cafe community that it's continued to grow.
It's just been fantastic. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's supported Death Cafe in any way.
It's been a long 10 years, hasn't it? There's been a lot of changes in the time, and it seems incredible now, doesn't it, that it all started in Hackney in a house. And so would you mind telling us about that, about the first ever Death Cafe, and even about how John thought of the idea initially anyway?
Well, John had talked for a long time about doing a projects around death and dying, and my husband Alistair saw an article about Bernard Crittaz in the Independent and cut it out and posted it to John, and John said, that's it, that's one of the things I want to do. And he patented the name Death Cafe and decided to invite some people that he knew and then friends of theirs to come and have the first Death Cafe. It was in September. I'd just come back from a holiday in Portugal, and we went down to London. I baked cakes before I went and took them down. And John was the waiter. So he took orders for tea and coffee and sandwiches we had as well, and cake. And he'd very carefully structured the Death Cafe with lots of tasks and questions and answers, and writing things down and burning things. And it was for 2 hours, and we were to talk about death and dying for an hour and a half, and then for the last half hour to talk about life and living. And so that's how we structured it to start with. But it was obvious you didn't need to do all of that. People were so keen to talk once they had that space, and it was a great success. And then we ran a couple more, and I think one of the papers, was it one of the London papers, I can't remember which one, wrote an article about it, and then the word spread, and John took it over, resigned from his work in Tower Hamlets and devoted his time to Death Cafe, and he did something called Funeral Advisor as well, that I think is still going as well. That's it, really.
Yeah, that's quite amazing, because I was going to actually show a clip of John answering the same question when I asked him that when I met him in 2015. And it was interesting what he said, because he said that after you had a debrief after the first session, and he said, Mum said to me, it's all great, it was great, but all this burning letters and things like that doesn't need to happen. And I think it was quite interesting, because he probably felt that it needed to be scripted at the beginning, just to make himself feel sort of more safe, didn't he? But he soon realized that all that people needed to do really was to come and talk, and you helped him realize that. And
yeah.
I think one of the first things he said was, if you just ask the question, what brings you here, that in itself will just start a whole conversation. And he was very clear, wasn't he, that there was no agenda, no promotions, not
leading anybody to a course of action or leading them into any product or service, that it was to be completely coming from the group rather than from anybody running it. And I find now that a lot of Death Cafe hosts, the new ones in particular, do try and have a structure, because they're afraid of that space and that silence, and they need to trust, because people are free to talk, and sometimes really magical things happen during death cafes.
Yeah, and I think if you do try and control it maybe a bit too much, you don't know what will come out, do you?
No.
Is that one of the you know, is that one of the things that you encourage facilitators specifically to do then?
Yeah. If they say they've got a list of questions, or we're going to talk about this and that, and have ideas for topics, I always remove it, because I do the moderation of the death cafes, and I will write and say, you know, because what it does is impose what the host or the facilitator wants to talk about, rather than what the group of people who are attending want to speak about, and that's what's important.
Yeah, and I feel that whichever death cafe you go to, it's going to be so different, because there's going to be different people, and the content of the conversations varies widely, doesn't it? It's quite it's quite unusual, like what you can talk about actually as soon as you bring out the subject of death, isn't it? Really. Were you surprised, Susan, at the fact it's become so popular, and you know, globally, it's a global movement, really, isn't it?
I'm amazed and thrilled that, you know, it's a part of John that is going to live on for the foreseeable future. It's wonderful, and what vision he had to do.
Yeah, he did, didn't he? And how was it, you know, he died, was it 4 years ago, Susan?
Yeah.
Now, what, you know, obviously that was a shock to you, but was it an easy decision to carry on, or how did?
There was no doubt about it. We just knew that we had to continue, and we spent the first few days after he died making sure that it would continue by tightening it up, and I think there was an appeal, wasn't there? I think one of the films that Jules sent you was an appeal following John's death, to raise some money, part to continue with Death Cafe.
Well, we're all very glad that it did continue, and that Jules is John's sister. Jules and you stepped in so widely. Has there been any changes since that time with the Death Cafe?
No, we try and maintain. I think it's important for me as his mum, and maybe it isn't right, but I want to maintain it, his vision as he saw it, rather than go off at different tangents, because it works. If it didn't work, it would be different. So I don't the guidelines. I think John, the year that he died, was talking about rewriting the guidelines, not to change things, but I'm not quite sure what he had in mind. But because he didn't do that, Jules and I haven't got the space, because both of us work anyway. So John devoted all his time when he wasn't. He did spend a lot of his time looking after his children as well. That was the other thing he did. But he was thinking about Death Cafe, was talking about writing a book as well, but that of course never happened.
Yeah, and Jules went on to change her career, didn't she?
Oh, absolutely, yes. She's talked for many years about becoming a doctor, and I really thought she'd done a marketing degree. I thought that's what she was good at, and it was when John died she decided that you need to seize the moment. You need to do what you need to do, and she had to pass an exam called the GAMSAT in order to be eligible to become a doctor, and she studied so hard for that, and now she's a medical student in her second year, and she's working really hard, and still doing a lot of the work for Death Cafe as well. Yeah.
Right. I can see, I'm not, my eyes aren't too good, but I can see there are a couple of questions coming up. Are you all right for us to just have a conversation and see what questions come up, and then we take it like that, Susan?
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. So yeah, do you want to see?
Yeah, I'll read out the comments, and then we can go like that, if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, perfect. So we have a comment from Izumi, who says, I just want to share that death cafes are now helping people all the way here in Southeast Asia talk about something that we have always struggled with. Very grateful to John and your family for starting this movement.
That's lovely.
And then we have a comment from Kate, who says, I agree. When death cafes are allowed to be free, it is amazing what people talk about.
Oh, good. Good.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's the comments.
Great. Yeah. People.
One more. Sorry. Izumi said, I also wanted to add that it's a bit tough without a structure here in Asia, where people are a lot more reserved. That's interesting, just how different cultures respond to I guess having a schedule or not makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm going to write that down, because I'll think about that in the future and talk to Jules about it.
Right. That's good to know. Has the pandemic had an impact at all? With, of course, everything's moved online, that's obvious, but has there been any other big things that you've discovered since we've had the pandemic?
I think the media became more interested in Death Cafe, particularly at the beginning of the pandemic. And I suspect, although I've only done a couple of death cafes during the pandemic, that the topics of conversation will be relevant to the times that we're living in. So people are I think death has been brought closer to younger people, hasn't it, by the pandemic. There was that fear, but it's not so bad now. But at the beginning, it was like there's a plague, and anybody could be struck down by it, and so people did engage more. The numbers of death cafes rose.
And has it gone down again since then?
A little bit, but not
still popular.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting, isn't it? Do you think that the pandemic has made it so that people talk in different countries in death cafes as well?
Of course, yes. Sorry.
Has that been something that's happened as well?
Yes, absolutely. The one that I did, which was last year, I had one from the East Coast and the West Coast of the States, and a couple of people from Europe as well, and people from the UK. Yes, and that made it all the richer.
I'm just going to pop in and say that I hosted one, a couple over the summer actually, and it was so international. Yeah. And I agree, Susan, it enriched the experience. You have all different perspectives. I think there was a few people from the States, Canada, the UK, and how amazing. Like I've now have the contact details of some psychotherapist in California who were still in contact because of this, and he recommends different death cafes, and so it's an amazing connection.
Where are you talking from?
I'm in London. I'm in England, but I'm from Canada, so it's nice to be able to link with people from all over. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I imagine that people at different times as well. It means that did it mean that also people who were physically unwell, perhaps, who couldn't attend an event, a physical event, did it make it a little bit more inclusive in a way?
Yeah, yes, it did do that, and people have become afraid of going out, haven't they? Because of the pandemic, and there's a lot of health anxiety around. and that has having them online has helped people, and I think lots of them are going to remain online.
Do you think? Yeah, I suppose there'll be a mixture of both, won't there? But that won't change. They'll still continue. I suppose there's still a need, isn't there?
Yeah, 6 months ago they were all online, and now sometimes it's about half and half. You know, but you're getting people from the local area then, so something's almost missing when you know just have people from the surrounding area rather than from all over the world.
That actually touches on a question that just popped up from Izumi as well, and it says, I've always felt that death cafes are super localized. I'm wondering if there are global online sessions that anyone can just pop by.
Yes, there are, and I always put the time zone on the online death cafe so that people can work out what time it is in their locality, because that can be tricky otherwise, can't it? When I can anyway. Sometimes it can be hard, but I do always try to do that.
I mean, just out of interest, Susan, on average, how many death cafes are there likely to be happening in one day?
Ooh, that's a hard question for me to answer because they're not listed it in that way. I usually moderate them about once a week, and there are at least 30 for me to look through that are happening in the next month or so. So that sounds like at least one a day and maybe more.
Great.
If there's 30, no, that's 30 a week.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So that's 4 a day, isn't it?
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's around the world. That's quite amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you think things have changed actually in the 10 years in terms of like, do you think there's been a bit of a culture shift in the taboo of talking about death? Do you think in the 10 years since Death Cafe has been existing, do you think there's been a change, a culture shift?
I don't know the answer. I'm sorry, Sybil, but it's really hard because I used to run my own death cafes now and again when I felt like it, and do some with John or for John. And when he died, I stopped because it was too painful for me to go. And one of the rules is that newly grieving people don't attend because the structure isn't right for them. So I stopped, and I've only been to a couple in the last couple of years. I've done one a year.
That's understandable. Yeah. I suppose it brings it to light that's what Death Cafe is, not a support group, doesn't it? It really highlights the fact that Death Cafe is there for people to discuss, but not necessarily for people who are bereaved to use it as a support group. There's other places to go for that, isn't there? So
that makes it. I mean, you'll know because you've attended them that actually that doesn't mean there's not a highly emotional content at times if that's what people want to bring.
Yeah, well, what I found, I mean, I've been to 3 or 4 death cafes, and I found that each and every one of them have been completely different. But I've never facilitated. What's it like to be a facilitator? Actually, it must be quite an interesting experience.
Yes, you can. There are some difficulties if people talk more than might be their fair share and stop other people speaking. So you can get into the I don't know, the politics or about group dynamics in some way. And it's always interesting. And it's different to, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. There's a difference between a therapy group and a discussion group, because when I'm leading a therapy group, I wouldn't ever talk about what I felt and thought. but in death cafes, I will share as much or as little of my experience as I want to, because I feel I'm a part of it in the same way that all the other participants are. I think it's got to be equal. There's got to be a sense of I think Buddhists would call it equanimity, that everybody's equal.
Yeah. Well, I suppose for people here who maybe who haven't been to a death cafe or who hasn't facilitated, what would your advice to them be? You know, how would they go about to find out more?
Go on to our website, deathcafe.com, and I think you can. I'm not good at websites and explaining, but I think you put in where you live, and then if there's any death cafes near you, then you'll find them. And of course, now there will always be an online one that you can attend.
And for those people who are confident and wanted to facilitate, would they go to the same website? And
yes, there are very precise guidelines, and Jules and I are always happy to help people who want a bit more support or advice and want to talk about how to do it. The other thing I wanted to say is some people think it's very scary to attend a death cafe, and I think people's experience once they've been is that it isn't. That talking about death is actually makes it easier, and that people laugh a lot at death cafes. Sometimes they might cry as well, but it's just a really profound space and conversation that so many strangers can meet together and talk at such an intimate level. It's magical.
Yeah. I remember John actually saying there's a bit of you, it's almost like having a midnight feast in a way, where you're being a little bit naughty in a way, and you're all, talking about something together that you're just not used to talking about with others. So there's something, like you say, magical, or he actually said the word naughty, actually.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Well, what I made in last year, I made another film for you, Susan, where I went to. We literally had time to go to. We literally. It was just at the end of lockdown, and we had a bit of space, and we filmed people from Finsbury Park Death Cafe. Because I wanted to make a film that actually showed what it's like to attend a death cafe. Because I completely agree with you, Susan. A lot of my friends would say to me, "Oh, I wouldn't go to that. That's morbid, or that's that's too sad or something." But you're right. It's the opposite, isn't it? There is a lot of laughter, and there's basically a lot of connection, actually, isn't there?
Yeah.
So
quickly, doesn't it?
It happens almost immediately. But Karina, you're a facilitator as well, aren't you? So what's it like as a facilitator?
I think, well, firstly, I think it's a privilege to just be able to hold a space for people to do and say what they wish. When you go into something with no expectations, but you have this sort of, like, death is obviously at the center of it. I feel like it's so amazing to watch because it just kind of breaks through all the like BS, like people just get straight to it. And I think that's why the connection happens so organically, but also so quickly. Because, you kind of just skip the small talk and you're like, okay, what are you scared of? What comes up for you? And people bring all sorts of angles. And I agree. Yeah, it's very life affirming, I think, to be a part of it, to participate. Especially, when there's people from all sorts walks of life. What a gift, and what a way to learn something, I think, is the biggest thing. I always walk away like learning something new. with complete strangers, like you said, you know, like what a strange idea that you'd all connect over something that people perceive as morbid, but actually isn't. And again, is very life affirming. So it is, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and I think that's what John used to say as well, Susan, wasn't it? That, you know, if you talk about death, you really do talk about life. It really makes you realize that you are alive, doesn't it? So shall I show the film that I made? Just I think we published it in June or something. Did we publish it on John's birthday, perhaps?
28th of October is John's birthday.
Oh no, we did it in June actually, but we published it in June for
the anniversary of his death.
Oh, that's what it was. Death day. Yeah. And it's an almost 10-minute film, but it shows lots of people talking about what it's like to be in a death cafe. But I'm going to go on YouTube to find the link. So whilst I'm doing that, Karina, do you mind chatting?
Yeah, we actually have a question. So the question is Susan, we've read online that you work as a psychotherapist.
Yeah.
How has Death Cafe influenced your role, or has it influenced your role as a therapist?
Well, I think I'm a Gestalt psychotherapist, and we deal with, well, supposedly existential issues. So I've always been encouraged to talk about death and other existential issues. And I think my training as a Gestalt psychotherapist influenced the model of Death Cafe, rather than the other way around. But I do talk to clients quite often about death and dying, and I'm not sure whether I do it more now. Also, I'm old, so you know it becomes much more figural as you get older. You know, the time left is going to be a lot shorter than the time that I've spent here. So I talk to my clients a lot. Does that answer the question, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's also really interesting to know that maybe your role doing Gestalt psychotherapy maybe had a role in shaping what we know as Death Cafe today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a Gestalt group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that. I can now share the video, I think. So shall I press the button and see what happens?
Yeah, give it a go.
Okay.
After my MND diagnosis, I was quite shocked how nobody, family or friends, ever talked to me about how I felt about death and dying. I realized that there is just this barrier to discussing the D word. It's such a taboo.
I feel like so many of us are craving for that opportunity to just sit with people who are just talking honestly. I think it happens so rarely.
Death isn't the end, it's very much a part of life, and it's about celebrating that whilst we're here.
Working around death can bring sort of great flexibility and openness and a sort of willingness to behave in ways that benefit the wider community rather than oneself. And so I got very excited and came up with lots of ideas for different projects around death and dying. And one of them was about talking about death. And then I heard about the work of Bernard Crétaz, who set up something called Café Mortel in Switzerland. And that involved talking about death in a public place with food and drink. And I just thought, that's it. And then I went on to start the Death Cafe. obviously some people don't want to talk about death, and that's fine, but for others that do, they find it really valuable. It throws back the spotlight on life, ironically, and lets people think about, okay, so if death's going to come, I'm still alive. What do I want to do with this amount of time that I've got left?
Everything wouldn't be as amazing as it is if it was going to last forever. So it is very much about embracing everything and talking about all of these topics which we try to avoid.
People have so many different expectations when they come to Death Cafe. I've had people say to me, okay, where are all the dying people? Or where are all the old people? Or where are all the goths? That's another one I get all the time. So it was interesting to take it to a location like a festival, which is full of 19-year-olds who are partying. They came along with an open mind, didn't know what to expect, and ended up having an amazing conversation in the middle of a festival about death. And people are always really surprised by how the conversations end up being about life, especially in that kind of environment. It was really quite enlightening.
The whole Death Cafe experience every time comes out of what the people who are attending bring with them. We don't prepare anything as facilitators. We prepare ourselves to expect anything, really.
The meetings are very informal. I've met some lovely people, and, as the saying goes, it's good to talk. Attendance at death cafes has helped remove the fear of dying, made me feel more confident, and able to talk to others about my feelings.
A lot of people keep quiet about their fear of death, for instance, you know. But when you open up and you start speaking about it, it's such a release and a relief as well, you know, to be able to do that and to see that other people also have similar fears.
I think it's sort of a magical thing about how conversations start in the cafe, because usually each group has a facilitator. So the facilitator might ask a question, people might reflect. Sometimes people come with something they really want to speak about.
I wouldn't describe myself necessarily as like a spiritual person, so crystals and stuff. That's all a little bit beyond me. So there are times when I'm in the Death Cafe and I'm just opening my mind, but that's just, to me, that's what I love anyway. I love having my mind, like I love feeling my mind just being stretched.
My first Death Cafe was online. I've never been to one kind of in person, which actually in a weird way kind of made it more accessible.
We've all got a different idea of death, though, haven't we? Some people think it's the end, nothing else after. Some think they're going to heaven, and others think they're going to go on for another incarnation to learn everything they haven't learned already. So,
I think, speaking for my dad, I think, Paul, you're someone that is very at peace, and it makes you at peace knowing, or believing in your mind that death is the end.
I've had friends that have lost family members in the last, kind of 6 months, and I found it a lot less scary being like, oh, well, how did they die? I'm sorry to hear that. How are you? And just actually not seizing up and thinking, oh, like, this is a red flag. I feel actually comfortable talking about it, and that makes me feel better. I'm sure it makes them feel kind of less awkward as well. And I've had lots more conversations with other people that are comfortable about doing it, and it's a good feeling, not being scared of that, I guess.
There's not positives that have come out of COVID, but you have to try and take the positives in a negative situation. That's the way I try and live my life, is that try and learn anyway, at least from something, even if it's difficult, even if there's bad things going on. And I think as a society, we are learning now that actually we are vulnerable, we are mortal beings, and I think that will hopefully make people sort of appreciate life a little bit different, live in a more positive manner, care more about the planet.
I came to realise that we are in a society split into two halves. You've got those who have had an experience, a significant loss, and are open to talking about death, dying in their experiences, and those who haven't and very much view death as the elephant in the room.
The whole death experience in this country is very sanitised, with too much focus on palliative care and the desire to keep people alive as long as possible. Little consideration is given to the wishes and desires of that person.
At Death Cafe, people really listen to each other. There's a massive amount of empathy. People make friends in a very short time, and it really brings out the essence of what it is to be human.
Some of the conversations I've had with some of the younger members have been very, very profound, and I really felt it was wonderful that I, as an older person, could offer in some help and some support.
We don't judge each other, and that we don't try to influence each other or persuade each other. So we very rarely get into a situation where there are debates.
That spark of life that started in the womb has its limit, and we do our best with it. I think everybody does their best with their life. It is a gift.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
That was a beautiful film.
Yeah, it was really nice film to make, actually. The whole process was good to make. Yeah, it's just good to see very clearly that it's not about debating, is it? It's because when you go to a death cafe, you realise no one really knows any answers or anything, do they? So it's such a lovely open space that I think it's quite hard to find another space like that, you know, in terms of a topic that unites people so much. But I thought it was quite interesting also about how Caroline, she runs the Finsbury Park Death Cafe, and she's you know also does I can never say that word. It's the fear of death.
Thanatophobia.
Yeah, and I thought that was quite interesting that Since she's opened up about that, a lot of people have come forward to say about their own fears of death. But I think it's nice in the Death Cafe how, you know, you have some people who are really fearful and some people who just really can't wait to talk about it as well. And having those, you know, mixture of different people together, that's what makes it magic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I suppose you're also like, you know, it's not a therapy session. You're not having to solve something. You're not having to analyze. You sort of like just go away with moments, really, don't you? Do you think that there's any changes that I know you mentioned, Susan, already, that, you know, you don't want the guidelines to be any different. What are your hopes for the future for Death Cafe?
Well, I had a chat with Jules about this just before, in the 10 minutes she had to spare between lectures. And so I wrote a few things down, so I'm just going to have a look. We hope that they're going to carry on expanding and go into any country where they aren't. We are looking for people to help by if people have language skills and can translate the guidelines into different languages, that would be a wonderful help. Also to help, because she and I both have other jobs and there are things that need to be done. People with skills about using websites, putting things on the website, doing, what was the word she used? Animation. To explain things. If people have those skills, we would love and wanted to help. We would love them to be able to do that, and also to donate to Death Cafe through Patreon. Either you can get that through the website or directly from Patreon/Death Cafe. Anything else? And we just want people to carry on talking about death and dying, and to carry on the conversation, because that's what John wanted. That is the whole point, because it helps you live your life better.
I agree. I suppose this is a great platform also, isn't it, for that call out for translators and people from, you know, different countries. This is a great place, isn't it?
It's the perfect place. Also, Susan, I'll put it out there on any of my sort of social media, and also get the Lifting the Lid to kind of do a post about, you know, just amplifying that request. We already have somebody that says, happy to help translate to Malay and Indonesian. How can I reach out? So you see, you ask and it shall happen, right? So this is great stuff. And then we also have a couple other comments that I just want to quickly run through. Kate says, she attended 11 having talked to the facilitators beforehand. The dissertation was about how a death cafe is not a controlled space and offers attendees agency and authority over their own experience. It is so different to orthodox modes of therapy, but can still be a life-changing and life-affirming therapeutic event.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be interesting to read the dissertation.
I agree. Yeah, send it our way. And she also said that film is wonderful. I'm organizing an event called The Art of Grieving next summer in St. Albans, and we are hoping to host 2 death cafes during the 3-month run of the exhibition. I would love to be able to show that film as part of the exhibition if possible.
Yeah, no problem. It's out there for everyone to use. So yeah, I'll just send a link or contact me, and no problem.
Right. And Kate said, my daughter is happy to share her dissertation with Susan if she would like to read it.
Oh, I'd love to read it. Thank you.
Perfect. So those are the comments so far, but yeah, so I'll definitely put those call outs as well. Any admin help that you need with the website and stuff, I'm also happy to help if you need in any way, shape, or form. So I'll be in touch.
It's great. I think in a way there's a tendency to think, because Death Cafe is such a global movement, and you look at the website and it looks also professional, and you just think, oh, they're all right. Like they don't, you think such a massive movement and entity that you think probably they don't need any help. So it's really, really, really good to know that, isn't it? That there are lots of ways that you can contribute to support Death Cafe. Yeah, what I thought also in the film is that actually there is a bit of a Death Cafe community, isn't there?
Yes.
Would you say it's not just a lots of series of pop-up events necessarily, is it? It feels to me like there's a community that's actually grown. Would you say, Susan?
I would absolutely agree, and lots of links have been made, particularly since the online Death Cafes. I think that there've been really close links of quite a few people I know go to several Death Cafes and have made friends and speak to them then out of the Death Cafe, and it's a really lovely thing. Really lovely. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. And seeing those people on your film, that Louise and Alistair, who helped so much when John died so suddenly, they were really helpful. Yeah, they're part of a community. Yeah.
Yeah, because Louise has she runs her own funeral directors as well, doesn't she?
Yes.
And,
yes. Alistair was one of the participants that you saw in the Death Cafe. He's a funeral director as well, and he actually arranged John's funeral. Yeah.
Poignant. Yeah. It was interesting with Louise, wasn't it, that she actually went to a festival to talk about.
I was wondering I would really like to know more about that.
That was in Festival, I think. I remember it was quite a few years ago. She was filmed, actually. She wasn't filmed last year. She was filmed probably about 4 or 5 years ago. But I think she went to Festival. But it shows that young people are also wanting that space, doesn't it? If you can have it at a festival on a Saturday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, does it mean that maybe there's other future places in Death Cafe that that are destined, that we don't know about yet?
I think that certainly when we first started out, that the proportion of younger people was very high, and I'm not sure whether that has continued, but they had a more open. I'm trying to think of the right word. They had a more open mind to be able to discuss death and dying, and I don't know whether that's continued or not, or whether now older people, who I suppose as you get older you think about death more.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, that? Because actually when I was younger, when I was 20, I was thinking and talking about death a lot then, because I remember reading a Tibetan book of living and dying, and it actually said you should actually talk about death when you don't need to, because if you talk about it just when you need to talk about it, that's when you're going to be very sad and very upset, and you won't have any resources in you. So his advice was a good one, which was talk about it when you don't, you're still healthy, you're not bereaved. And I am older now, obviously, and I'm really grateful and glad that I did do that, because I've had a lot of bereavement recently, and I think it really, really helped me, actually, the fact that I'd had sort of explored it in young years as well. But I mean, I do remember when I went to a Death Cafe, and there was probably about 14 people on the table in my particular little table, which was about 14 people. And I remember looking around thinking, oh, I'm about like 15 years older than most people here. And it was like a lot of young people there. And I found that really encouraging.
I wonder if it's easier when it feels far away.
Maybe.
Probably.
It probably, yeah. And to me, it just sounds like it makes the most sense to talk about it when you don't need to, really. But I suppose even then, it might still feel a bit frightening, mightn't it, if you haven't talked about it before?
Yeah, I'm just going to turn a light on. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Because it got very dark outside.
Do you ever think about going to schools or anything with Death Cafe, perhaps, or youth clubs, or any? I suppose is it people that come to you and suggest places more?
Yeah, for me it is. I used to have more get up and go about doing them myself. Now usually people ask me, and if somebody's asked me, that's how. Then I have said yes, but I haven't.
Have there been any requests, to take it to very young people?
No. That I've had quite a few death cafes of students run them while they're doing courses at university that are relevant. But no, not in schools.
Yeah.
And I could imagine some people being horrified at that idea.
Yeah. It depends how you present it often, isn't it? I did see in one of your notes that in one of the sessions, someone said that they changed the name to Life.
Yes.
So Life cafes, just to make it more sort
approachable
for some people.
John wanted it to be almost a shock title.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says what it is on the tin.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think there was quite a bit of a debate with the logo as well, wasn't there? Because I think John really wanted to see because the logo is a cup, isn't it, and a skull. Yes. He really wanted it to be like, no, this is death. This is, he wanted it to be like not hide the fact that it's death.
Yes, if you're going to hide it, that's not the idea. That we're trying to do the opposite, to bring it out of the closet, not push it back in. Yeah,
absolutely. I've got to nip out because I need to moderate another session, but you guys can continue, please, because this is a fantastic conversation and people are still quite engaged. There's an email address, Susan, for you to contact for the dissertation if you're interested. So maybe Sybil, you can write that down.
Yeah, I'll do that. Great.
And then there was one question that I'll ask before I nip out.
Okay.
It says, does Susan think the type of venue makes a difference? The 11 that my daughter attended were in various places, including a school, cafes, village hall, etc.
I think it probably does create an atmosphere. I think the important thing is that you can hear what other people are saying, because I once had it in a cafe when people were clanking and making a noise and people couldn't hear. We also did it in some sort of tombs underneath a church. I don't know whether there's a name for that. John and I had a death cafe, and that was very interesting. I think that did add something to the atmosphere. So yes, it is going to make a difference. I know some people hold them outside, particularly since the pandemic, and in cemeteries, which would also be interesting. I suppose you've got not only the internal thoughts about death, but you have external things around you that are making you think about death and dying as well.
Well, it brings on different conversations, doesn't it, where you are actually? So it would have an effect, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Do you, I mean, with the timing, is that anything that changes as well? Because is it 2 hours normally, or can it be longer, or is that?
We started off with 2 hours and we actually cut it down to 1.5 hours. And I think that's enough. I think sometimes 2 hours feels a long time for a facilitator anyway. Maybe the participants might feel differently. Some people do an hour, and there's a couple that do drop-in sessions, which I'm not sure how that would work, but you know.
Oh, right. So people come whenever they want to, and they just flow and join the conversation. Have there been good feedback about that then?
I haven't read anything about it. I haven't looked to see if there's. I need to check. I haven't ever checked out, but I will have a look.
I mean, obviously, having started this with John and Jules, and you know, it's a bit of a family thing as well, isn't it? You know, how do you envisage it continuing, you know, further on down the line?
Well, Jules has the vision that John's children are going to take over from her and I, but I don't think she's ever asked them. I think they need to be adults to be able to do it, and they're only 11 and 14 at the moment, so they're not quite ready to do it yet, but possibly.
But they've got an interest in talking about. They're quite open to talking about death. I know that from what John said. So, yeah. But yeah, obviously it will continue. Yeah. It's almost like it has to continue now, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, in my eyes, it certainly does. But you know, I'm not here forever. I'm going to die, so it'll be up to somebody else in the future. To Frank and Gina, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, certainly it's helped a lot of people, hasn't it? How does it feel to have created something that has been very useful and helpful?
Well, I feel like it's John that created it, and I helped him. I don't feel it's an equal. It's an equal thing. He's the vision, and it was wonderful when he was alive to be able to do this thing together that we did from time to time, and I valued it whilst he was alive, and I'm so glad to have those memories now that he's died. And I'm incredibly proud of him, as I was when he was alive.
Yeah. And he's left a massive legacy, actually, hasn't he? That's, you know, in terms of if you have a purpose of life, that's an incredible thing he's achieved, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I really think, though, also that he would say that you were very much part of the very beginning, and if it hadn't been for you helping him on that first ever death cafe that you had, that he wouldn't probably have been able to do it himself. I think he really did value the fact that you were there, literally supporting him as well.
Yeah, we did work really well together. It was a great joy for me.
Yeah. Well, have you got anything else you'd like to add before we end? Because we're back to the beginning again now, actually, aren't we, in a way?
Yeah. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying yes. I know the technical bits were making us nervous, weren't they, at the beginning? But I'm really glad we got through all that, and I'm really glad we did do it. Actually, went out of our comfort zone to do it, but yeah, thank you. And I'll make sure you get the email of the person who did the dissertation, and I hope that other people come forward to volunteer as well, because it's important that people know that, you know, the Death Cafe is actually serviced on love in a way, really, isn't it?
It's very much so. Very much so.
So it's very good to have contributors too, isn't it? Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Susan. Yeah, and I'll see you again soon. But I think we just go now, actually. Yeah. So, well, thank you everyone for whoever's here. Thank you for listening, and and have a good rest of the festival. Yeah, take care then. Bye, Susan.
Bye, Sybil. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.